The Man Who Would Not by James E. Gunn. Originally published in the December 1969 issue of Worlds of If magazine, republished in a collection of the author's stories in 1972 entitled Breaking Point, which has so far had 8 reissues. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. The Man Who Would Not. The sun sank slowly below the purple hills. The tattered clouds that streamed up the western sky were orange, red, and violet banners flying above a tragic army marching beyond the horizon to some final glory. They watched it from inside the room, the man and his visitor. The window that framed the scene was the only place in the room, except the door, that had not been submerged in a tide of books. They had mounted the walls and toppled into corners and reached tooled leather fingers across the floor. The visitor stood in front of the window, his stocky figure silhouetted against the light. He was a little blurred around the edges, like an afterimage that is beginning to fade, but he was solid enough. The room was silent, but the silence was rippled with words that had been spoken, the way a still pond remembers the pebbles tossed into it. As the colors faded in the west, a husky voice spoke out of the silence and out of the darkness that clasped one corner of the room, revealing only the arm of a tapestry-covered chair, a hand that rested motionless upon it, and a foot stuck out stiffly onto a stool, the thin sole touched by a single orange ray of sun. "How will it end?" the voice asked. The answer came over the visitor's shoulder in cultured, resonant words, with a hint of accent like those of a foreigner who has learned to speak the language better than the natives. "In fire, in ice, with a bang, with a whimper, by cosmic accident, by man's own will and hand. What does it matter? I would know. That is the most persistent trait of intelligence. You will not tell me? Perhaps I do not know. Perhaps I cannot say. We are not gods, you know. What are you, then? Scientists? Experimenters? In your language, those words might describe us best. And we are your experiment." The visitor turned around. His face, too, was shadowed. "Yes, and now the experiment is over. We have found out what we wished to know. We clean the test tube, sterilize the equipment. You should understand." "Understand? I should not even believe, and yet I do, without knowing why. All your life has been preparation for this moment. You cannot help but believe, but you also must understand. Intellectually, I do. Emotionally, I cannot accept the statement that this experiment has achieved its purpose, that man cannot achieve more. It is not men, you understand, but the experiment. Men have had millions of years, hundreds of thousands of generations, thousands of civilizations. What men can do further is repetition. And yet, do you give me hope?" the husky voice asked. "There is no hope. There is only this odd contradiction in man that you mention, this tension between his intelligence and his animal instincts. He calls it emotion. The curious interplay between your reason and instincts has kept us fascinated long past the experiment's planned duration. But there are many more odd facets to the universe that we would explore, and this small complication has preoccupied us too long. We can deal with the curious fact of man in ways that are not so complex, nor so expensive. Leave us. Let us live out our destiny. We are your destiny. You exist only as an experiment. Does the scientist leave his laboratory to build another when one experiment is completed? Neither do we. And although this laboratory, the very concept of which staggers your imagination, is only one among many, we do not waste. To us, waste is unimaginable. If you have no love for what you have created, have you no pity? None. No feeling? None. We are rational beings. Our only motivation is the search for knowledge. Perhaps once, so far back in the mists of our beginning that even we have forgotten, we had that confusion of intellect that you call feeling. If so, it has been lost irretrievably. We can no more keep from doing the rational than you can stop breathing. On the other hand, you have evolved recently and rapidly. You are an accretion of characteristics, some of them incompatible. The man said nothing. We had speculated that intelligence is the superior and dominant characteristic, the visitor continued, but we found that among men this is true only occasionally. These men you call monsters. We find them dull, but you confused and emotional ones have fascinated us beyond your allotted span. You are the monsters. But you would consider us so, and yet we do nothing that is not rational, whereas you use your intelligence largely to rationalize the crimes you commit against your fellows. We create, said the man. The visitor stepped forward. His shoes and trousered legs looked ordinary in the light cast from a distant corner by a floor lamp. His shoulders and face still were in darkness. Yes, you create, far beyond your predictable powers, insanely, without plan or reason. Your creation is a magnificent waste. We cannot understand it, because we cannot waste. We do not have what you call art or music or literature. We do not understand what you call beauty or what you call ugliness, except in theory. Then man has something to offer, something you do not have. He can complement your rational existence with his irrational creativity. With his assistance, there is nothing you cannot do, no goals to which you cannot aspire. We do not wish to do anything. We aspire to nothing except to knowledge, and that we seek in our own rational ways, which the addition of emotion would only muddle. And now, of course, man seeks to move beyond this test tube in which the human experiment began and to infest and to destroy other experiments. To allow you to do so would not be rational. Your defense of mankind is futile. Man cannot be saved. He is doomed. The man in the shadows sighed. After a moment, he said, You let slip the fact that there are other ways to deal with the fact of man. I let nothing slip. We make no mistakes. What are these ways? Would you try to understand us intellectually? Will you run us through your computers until we make sense? That is not possible, but ever since the end of the experiment has been obvious, for the last 3 millennia, we have chosen the most creative among you. They have been, there is not quite the word in your language to describe it, translated into another existence. We have chosen religious innovators, military leaders, political geniuses, philosophers, artists, writers, composers, scientists, Christ and Mohammed, and Gautama Siddhartha, Machiavelli, and Solon and Jefferson, Plato and Aristotle, and Kant and Nietzsche, Michelangelo, and Praxiteles and Picasso, Shakespeare, and Homer and Hemingway, Bach and Beethoven, Brahms and Berlioz, Archimedes, Galileo and Newton and Einstein. There are thousands more, and thousands whose names you never heard, all of them creators, and that is why I am here tonight. I wondered. I am none of these. I have never created anything. You are one of them, the visitor said. The fact that you have not exercised your creativity yet is incidental. We may not have it ourselves, we may not understand it, but we have learned to recognize creativity and its signs. In the relative eternity to come, you will have time to be creative. Me? Among them? You are one of them, of equal stature. You can be one of them for long ages, interacting with them, learning from them as they will learn from you, and we from all, in a way that you have only imagined here among your books. Incredible! In your terms, yes. My dreams. Heaven. So we understand. If I were a superstitious man of another age, I would think you an emissary of the devil come to tempt me. We all are the devil, and all the God you imagine, both and neither. In another age we spoke in their language and in their frame of reference, as we speak to you in yours. In what way would existence continue? The man had leaned forward until his upper body, clothed in a gray sweater, was in the light, although his face still was in the shadows. In a way much like what you experience now, with certain measures taken to delay your mortality. And where would it continue? In a place removed from here, but one you would find pleasant, stocked with all the things you enjoy, the food, the drink, the books, the music, and the art, and the people, and the talk, and the ideas, and the time to contemplate and to create. Stop! You describe heaven. So you would consider it. You know me well. What we can know, we know well. The silence returned while the man sank back in his chair and the visitor looked back toward the west, where the sunset had faded and the twilight had darkened into night. The evening star gleamed brilliantly alone above the hills. Finally the man spoke again. What of my wife? The visitor turned back to the room. The person who let me in, but only when I insisted? Who called you a fool? Yes. You do not find her attractive. I did once. You do not love her. Once I did. She is not exceptional. We cannot save her. In any case, you will not lack for feminine companionship of a more congenial sort in the place where you are going. The man laughed. Not only heaven, but paradise. So you will consider it. I believe, after all, that you are an emissary of the devil. You know so well how to tempt a man. We are rational. And you want to understand the irrational. What about the rest of humanity? A few, like you, we will save. The rest will be destroyed. They are worthless, redundant. Even you will admit this. In my more rational moments, perhaps I would. But why do you come to me this way and explain these things to me? If I accepted them as reality, as more than the strange ravings of a madman, or the stranger imaginings of my own mind, why should you not merely take me away when you destroy the rest? Perhaps your understanding is a condition of the translation. Perhaps it is part of the experiment. Perhaps it is both. Or neither. What if I should refuse? The visitor stopped in the act of speaking. For the first time he appeared uncertain. He stepped forward. He wore an ordinary blue jacket. Why should you? Why should you throw away what you desire most? Would you take me anyway?" The man leaned forward into the light. He was in the middle years, still vigorous, but no longer young. "No, it would do you no good to refuse, however. You would be throwing away your chances of eternity and the satisfactions of creation in a foolish gesture. You cannot save mankind. I cannot be a party to its destruction either. If the others before me agreed to your proposal, perhaps they did not have to contemplate the imminent obliteration of the rest." The visitor stepped forward fully into the light. He had an ordinary face. Now it seemed disturbed. "You would refuse?" "Yes, I refuse." "But why? What do you gain? What can you hope to achieve?" "Perhaps I refuse the essential conditions of your offer. Perhaps by this act I refuse to join those who would profit from the sufferings they inflict on those capable of understanding the nature of their plight. Perhaps I refuse to profit personally from an act which destroys my race. Perhaps I choose to demonstrate to you in this conclusive fashion that you do not understand man at all, that all the other experiments you might perform are meaningless beside this one, that you wipe it out not because it is finished, but because you cannot understand it. You are willing to risk so much?" "All." "You will not change your mind?" "I will not." "So I see." "Thank you for your offer. It was enticing, but I must regretfully decline. I think you can find the way out." The man in the book-cluttered room sat quietly in his chair for a long time after his visitor had left. Then he rose, walked to a desk in the corner, took paper from it and a pen, and began to write. In the street outside, the visitor looked toward the house he had just left, and then toward the dark hills where the evening star now had set and Orion was sinking. He stood there for a long time before he faded like an after-image and was gone.